Isn't that what the lock was supposed to do? The mirror lock to stop it from doing that?
Some of the mean scopes have a mirror lock on them, and the Celestrons never have. And that's, I'm going to show you in just a minute how I dealt with this. Some people try to put locks in. Some people think locks are a bad idea. The mean scopes have had a lock on them for quite a while to prevent most of this mirror flow. And that was probably a good. So, you know, I'll show you in just a second. That's the next thing. The next biggest problem I had was that, you know, I had a fairly decent mount. The G11 is considered to be a photo mount. It's not the best to ground, but it's like, and this is the best piece of advice I think Jeff gave us last month, is to spin your wad on the mount first, build your scope from the bottom up. Right? So in setting this up, I spent most of my money here on the mount. About half the total price of the full setup was the mount. It's probably a good choice. It's time for a better one at some point. That's a lot of money. But its problem was periodic error. And, not exactly periodic error, but I'll show you in a second. The Orion ED, I love it as a scope. It's a thing about fine optics, especially for something that's less than $500. Its biggest problem is that photos are really cheap, so that's easy to upgrade. And my imager, my webcam imager, is pretty insensitive because it's a color chip. So those, in that order, were the problems I've been fighting with all this time. And so from the top down, I started fixing those. And so this is what I've done to my setup in order. I've done all this, you know, do these at home, work on this stuff at home. And the first thing I did was I took the filter out of my DSLR. And I probably most of you know about that. It's pretty easy to find out about it. You can buy them now, and it's a cost of extra. So you have the filter taken out of your camera, but you can do it yourself. And I did that myself. It works. It helps the sensitivity of the DSLR quite a bit in each element. So that's the biggest thing you can probably do for a setup like this.
How long did it take you to do that? The camera?
Oh, it only took to actually physically swap it. It only took me a couple hours.
Did you swap it, or did you just remove it?
I took I took the IR block filter that was in there out, and I replaced it with a piece of clear glass that was the same thickness, so that the autofocus mechanism, when I use the camera to take standard snapshots, the autofocuser won't work right if you don't have a piece of glass in there.
So you still use it as a daytime camera?
I still use it as my standard, you know, family camera. So I wanted the autofocus to work, so I just replaced it with a piece of glass. It only took a couple hours to do it. But it was a little hair raising. You were pretty focused on what you're doing there. There's some little tiny bits.
I guess you can pay to have that done?
You can pay. Anybody know how much it costs? $600 to have it replaced? I still do it myself.
For that price, I would do it myself, yeah.
We talked about having a filter removal party at one point, but nobody volunteered to camera. That was Jeff, I think, was that. Yeah. So then the next step was, we mentioned this mirror flock issue, and I had big problems with that. And so I installed mirror locks in my SCQ to help with that. And I'll show you a picture of it now. And the next biggest thing was...
Have you ever heard about people focusing only in one direction?
Oh yeah, I always do that.
And that was, if you found the right direction, that could solve many health issues?
It helps.
But doesn't eliminate.
It helps a lot, yeah. And I always, at some point I figured out, I think Rod Hollis, at one point I remember learning from him that you always want to end your focusing on these counterclockwise, because you're pushing the mirror up and pushing the mirror out, and so it won't tend to fall back, or at least you've got some pressure on that screw it. And that, I mean, it tends to help, but still, you know, when you're doing a 3-hour exposure, your telescope's going to be moving, and it's the rocking, it's the changing weight that I find is causing problems with mirror flop not changing focus.
And how did it manifest itself? Was it actually a flop, or was it a gradual change?
I should say a lot. It's not a gradual change. It's one that's actually synced on camera. It took me a long time to figure this out. It's not flop. What it is the camera's tracking and everything pretty good until the shutter closes, and then when the shutter reopens and the mirror flaps on camera causes the scope to jump just a little bit, a
Oh,
little vibration, and that's when the mirror settles. So if you actually look at the images, I'll get no drift until I close the shutter and the images will shift. And I'm okay until the next exposure. Every time something touches the scope, the images shift. And I think it's the mirror settling every time something hits it.
So you don't, it's not a differential flex in your two tubes?
I thought it was for a long time, but I'll show you. We've got there's about 90% of that
Okay.
fluid is just by putting this off. Okay, and so then I put some new worm block bearings on my G11, and that helped a little bit. I'll show you just a bit of that.
Is
Then I won't talk about the
But just the bearings, not the precision worm and all that.
I didn't change the worm, and I'll show you why. It's not the worm, it's the bearings that was compromised.
So this is the 76 second?
It's 76 seconds.
77.
Yeah, exactly. All right, I won't talk about the last two because it's obvious and you get a better focuser. And I changed the chip in my little imager just to make it more sensitive by taking the color chip out, putting it in black and white, and that gave me about threefold sensitivity on guiding chip. And that was fun to do, but now you can buy a much better camera than that next image for the same price. So I wouldn't recommend using it. So here's what we did with here's the mirror lock issue. All right, so up here,
Go the other backwards.
the other backwards. Okay. So here is an exposure before I did the mirror locks. This is a 30-minute guided exposure. It's guided. So that guide star didn't move a pixel for 30 minutes.
And you're sure it wasn't flex?
And I thought for sure this was flex for the longest time. So I worked on getting things more rigid, and I changed, and I did it backwards, and I guided from the big camera line into the little one. And it was something moving. And like I said, I finally convinced myself by realizing that these little jumps, this drift that you see is an average of, it's 130-minute long exposure. But if you take a bunch of, if you take 31-minute exposures, you find that there's no drift in each exposure, but there's a jump in between each exposure. And it's in the RA direction. So it all starts adding up, and something's causing something to drift in RA every time you tap the scope. And I can induce that chip by just taking my finger and going like that on the scope. Right? So something was drifting there. So I figured it's got to be mirror flow. So I took the thing apart and I made these little plastic tabs. There's 3 of them. You just see them there. And the one is bolted down on the bottom of the mirror cell. And then this screw up here is an adjustment screw. So the little tab, which is sitting inside the mirror cell, then the screw, as you tighten it down, the tab will move in. And so there's 3 tabs that come in and they just touch the edge of the mirror. All right, and so it's a bad thing if you think about it. You don't want to be doing that, but if you think about it, it's not a terrible thing. So these little tabs come in and they touch the edge of the mirror and they prevent it from settling if you hold it just tight enough. All right, and so if you do that, so after putting these tabs in and then screwing them down a little bit, I repeated the 30-minute guided exposure in the bottom, and so you can see all that funny business is going on.
Now, do you tighten those down after you focus, or do they keep tension all the time?
I kind of keep messing with them all the time. I start with them completely off, and then as I focus, I kind of get them tightened, snugged down just a little bit.
Finger
And as I approach to focus, then I get them to where they want to be at the end. And the question is, the question of how tight is the big issue. Not very tight at all, because you can completely distort the mirror by tightening these things down. It's more than to tell you how tight to turn that screw is hard, but imagine getting in your car and turning on the radio. Right? How hard do you have to turn that knob? Just a little bit. I mean, just barely feel it in the mirror. That's about how tight you want to touch the mirror. Just enough to touch, not enough to squeeze.
You do all 3 points with the screw in. You don't have 1 or 2 points on the spring load.
1 or 2 points on the what?
That you 1 or 2 points that you have spring loaded. Instead of having all 3 with screws alone. You can still have all 3 screws. And then you have 2